Today we will be cleaning out the intake system in this 2001 Ford F150. We will be performing this service using AMSOIL's Power Foam. Now, AMSOIL has recently updated the look of this product, so if you are buying a can of this or you're just checking it out online, you will notice that it does have a slightly different look. The first thing we need to do is start the vehicle and let it warm up to operating temperature. Once your engine has reached normal operating temperature, we can pop the hood. Once we've opened our hood, we need to locate the air cleaner assembly and intake cover. I'm first going to remove the intake cover. To remove this cover, I'm using a 10mm socket. One nice benefit to AMSOIL's Power Foam is that it does clean deposits from ethanol and other degraded fuels. So when you go to the pump nowadays in some areas of the country, it's impossible to find gasoline that does not have ethanol added into it. The ethanol in your fuel system does leave deposits, and those do need to be cleaned out. So what AMSOIL's Power Foam will do is it will eat all those deposits and it will pass those through your exhaust system. After my intake cover has been removed, I'm going to remove the air filter. Then I'm going to locate and disconnect the oxygen sensor. On this particular wiring harness, there is a button on top that locks it in place, and you have to depress the button and pull before you can disconnect that. Next, I'm going to disconnect the mass airflow sensor assembly from the air filter housing. To loosen this clamp, I'm using a flathead screwdriver. AMSOIL's Power Foam will clean intake valves, intake manifolds, and throttle body plates to keep the combustion intake system running at peak efficiency. This is going to help reduce the engine ping, and it also keeps carburetors and injector systems operating like new. The mass airflow sensor assembly has a wiring harness, and if we follow that wiring harness, we lead to a connection point, and this is where we're going to disconnect it. Much like the last one that we disconnected, there is a small button that we need to press in before we can disconnect this. After that, we can remove the rest of our air intake, and again, to loosen this clamp, I am also using a flathead screwdriver. AMSOIL's Power Foam will remove gum and varnish inside the engine. It's also going to increase the horsepower of your engine because the entire intake system is all cleaned out. So there'll be no contaminants that restrict the flow or operation of any components. While the engine is running, we want to spray the Power Foam directly into the throttle body as fast as you possibly can without stalling the engine. Now, I would recommend starting out a little bit slow until you get the feel for it, and then you can increase the speed at which you're spraying the Power Foam into the engine. What you don't want to happen is the engine continuously die and you having to restart it, and then you spray more and it dies and you have to restart it, because that stresses the starter in your vehicle. You will also want to work in a well-ventilated area. The Power Foam smells about like liquid mothballs, and it stinks pretty bad, so you want to make sure you're doing this outside, or make sure that your shop is extremely well ventilated. Prior to doing this service, it is good to protect any painted surfaces and the mass airflow sensor from the Power Foam spray. Now, for this particular vehicle, I am using 2 full cans of Power Foam because this vehicle has approximately 100,000 miles on it and it has never been cleaned. I'm going to assume that the inside of the throttle body and the intake system is pretty gummed up. So again, I'm using 2 cans of Power Foam just to make sure that everything gets clean. Once you've exhausted the entire can of power foam into your engine, you want to shut the engine off and allow it to sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. While this is sitting, you can go ahead and replace any intake covers or air cleaner components that you previously took off. After about 10 to 15 minutes, you can restart the engine and let it run for a little while. Now, it is also recommended that when you are using the power foam, you want to avoid any contact with hoses and exterior plastic components. If you want to prevent the power foam from eating any paint, make sure that you don't overspray the power foam so that it gets onto your paint. On this particular vehicle, I'm performing this service outside where it is a little bit windy. So as I was spraying this into the engine, there was a little bit of overspray. I'm going to make sure I wash that off immediately. Additionally, AMSOIL's Power Foam is not recommended for use in diesel engines or as a general purpose degreaser. You want to make sure that you are only using this to clean the intake system in your gasoline powered engine. Beside gasoline powered vehicles, you can also use AMSOIL's Power Foam in tractors, lawn equipment, motorcycles, boats, UTVs, and ATVs. There is a good chance that the check engine light will come on when you perform this service. Now, the primary reason why the check engine light comes on during this service is that we disconnected the mass airflow sensor, we disconnected the oxygen sensor, so the computer thinks that there's some type of an issue where its calculations aren't adding up to what they're supposed to be because we took those off. And because those calculations don't add up inside the vehicle's computer, that will trigger the check engine light to come on. After we've performed this service and we've driven the vehicle for about 1 to 2 days, that check engine light should turn back off.